The metallic taste of betrayal flooded my mouth as my mother's whispered words seeped through the hospital room door. "So you're saying if we take her other kidney?" The heart monitor beside my bed seemed to echo louder in the sudden silence that followed. My body went rigid against the thin mattress, every nerve ending suddenly hyper-aware of the tubes snaking into my arms, the bandages wrapped around my torso where they'd already taken one kidney 3 days ago. "She wouldn't survive that!" The doctor's voice cut through the darkness, firm and incredulous. "She's already lost one. Removing the second would mean—" "But Nathan needs it," my father interrupted, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience he used when explaining why my brother's needs always came first. "He's the one with a future. She's already damaged goods now. She'll never be able to do much anyway." The fluorescent light above my bed flickered once, casting strange shadows across my closed eyelids as I fought to keep my breathing steady. My 17-year-old body felt like it was floating somewhere outside itself, watching this conversation happen to someone else's daughter. "This would be a sacrifice that actually means something for once," my mother added, her voice sharp with the same tone she used when discussing my disappointing report cards or my failure to get into advanced classes like Nathan. "My name is Claire, I'm 17, and I was supposed to be just another statistic. This is the story of how I became the ending they never saw coming." The car accident had been 3 weeks ago. Nathan behind the wheel, me in the passenger seat, both of us heading home from his lacrosse practice. He walked away with scratches. I woke up missing a kidney and discovering my parents saw this as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. What they didn't know was that their whispered conversation outside my door would become the blueprint for my escape. I waited until their footsteps faded down the hallway before pressing the call button. When Nurse Margaret appeared, the one with kind eyes who actually looked at me when she spoke, I managed to whisper the words that would change everything. "I need to speak to someone about feeling unsafe." The transformation was swift and surgical. Within hours, a social worker named Judith sat beside my bed with a notepad and the softest voice I'd ever heard. I told her everything in clinical detail, my voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath my ribs. By that afternoon, a protective order sealed my room from family access. By evening, my parents discovered they no longer had legal control over my medical decisions. The shouting match in the lobby could be heard from my floor. "She's brainwashing our daughter!" My mother's voice echoed through the halls as security escorted them out. "That girl belongs to us!" But I didn't belong to them anymore. Not after what they'd planned. Not ever again. 2 weeks later, I was discharged directly into temporary foster care. Foster care wasn't glamorous. Cramped apartment, secondhand furniture, caseworkers with tired eyes. But it was mine. Safe was everything. I finished high school online while my body healed. Worked nights at a bookstore while other kids went to parties. Saved every penny while my former family assumed I disappeared into the system like so many other throwaway children. They had no idea I was building something they'd never expected me capable of creating. By 19, I'd earned my GED with perfect scores. By 21, I'd completed a business degree through night classes while working full-time. By 24, I was head of operations at a healthcare startup that specialized in patient advocacy systems, a rapid rise that came from working 18-hour days, taking on every project others avoided, and having the unique insight that only someone who'd survived medical betrayal could bring to patient protection. Every policy I wrote, every protection I built into our company structure, carried the DNA of that conversation I'd overheard through a hospital door. The resume landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning like a ghost from a past life I'd thought was buried. Nathan Miller. My brother, though he'd never know I'd taken our great-grandmother's maiden name years ago. His application for our senior management position included a professional headshot that showed the same cocky smile that had gotten him out of trouble our entire childhood. He had no idea his little sister, the one he'd probably assumed was dead or forgotten in some group home, was now the person who would decide his professional future. I scheduled the interview for the following week, using my assistant's name on the calendar invitation. The boardroom was deliberately intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble conference table, framed awards covering one entire wall. I arrived early and positioned myself at the head of the table, wearing the tailored navy suit I'd bought to celebrate my promotion and the confidence I'd built one difficult decision at a time. Nathan walked in at exactly 2 p.m., resume in hand, that familiar entitled stride carrying him toward what he assumed would be another easy victory. His step faltered when he saw me, then stopped entirely when recognition hit him like a physical blow. "You," he whispered, his face draining of color. "You're supposed to be." "Dead?" I smiled, gesturing for him to sit. Clearly that didn't work out the way Mom and Dad hoped. He remained frozen in the doorway, his eyes darting from my face to the nameplates on the table, to the corner office, visible through glass walls behind me. "You're the COO. You're the one who you sent a resume to without doing basic research." "Yes." I opened his file, scanning the mediocre grades and thin work history with theatrical interest. "Tell me, Nathan, what qualifies you for a senior position at a company dedicated to protecting patients' rights?" The question hung in the air like smoke. He finally moved to sit, his hands visibly shaking as he placed them on the table. "I didn't know you worked here. I didn't even know you were." Alive? Successful? No longer the disposable daughter you could harvest for spare parts? My voice remained perfectly professional, but each word landed with surgical precision. That must be disappointing. "Listen, I wasn't part of what Mom and Dad discussed. I didn't know." "You didn't know they asked a doctor to use my remaining kidney for you while I was unconscious, while you were at home complaining about having to visit me in the hospital?" I leaned forward slightly, my hands folded. "Or you didn't know that conversation was recorded by hospital security audio as part of their ethics investigation?" His mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The confidence that had carried him through life, the assurance that came from being the chosen child, crumbled in real time. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, closing his file with a soft snap. "You're going to leave this building and never apply to work here again. You're also going to discover that our industry is smaller than you think, and word travels fast about people who can't be trusted with vulnerable populations." Nathan's face flushed red. "You're ending my career over something that happened years ago, something I had no control over." I stood slowly, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked to the window overlooking the city. "You mean like how you all destroyed my childhood, my sense of safety, my trust in family? Like how you would have destroyed my future if I hadn't found the strength to save myself?" When I turned back to face him, my expression was calm. "The difference is, I earned everything you see here. This company, this position, this power to protect people who've been betrayed by the ones who were supposed to love them most. You, on the other hand, have spent your entire life coasting on privilege you never questioned." He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. "You always played the victim." "No, Nathan." My voice was quiet but unmistakable. "I was the victim. Now I'm the consequence." After he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass, I sat alone in the boardroom for several minutes. Through my industry contacts over the following weeks, I learned that Nathan struggled to find employment anywhere in healthcare management. The whispered concerns about his character references followed him from interview to interview, and eventually he was forced to leave our city entirely, relocating to find work in an unrelated field. The boy who'd once had every door opened for him discovered what it felt like when those doors slammed shut permanently. That evening, I drove to the small apartment I'd chosen overlooking the lake. Not because I couldn't afford better, but because it felt like home in a way the mansion I'd grown up in never had. I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and opened the email that had been waiting since morning. The hospital where I'd nearly died was implementing a new protocol to protect minors from unethical parental medical decisions. They wanted to name it the Claire Protection Initiative. The ethics investigation that had started with my case had led to policy changes that would protect other children from experiencing what I had endured. Claire, my chosen name. The name I'd selected when I legally separated from the family that saw me as a collection of spare parts rather than a human being with dreams and value. A week later, the letter arrived with no return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Inside was 3 pages of desperate pleading: financial ruin, Nathan's unemployment, the house in foreclosure, medical bills they couldn't pay. A private investigator they'd hired had tracked me down through my professional accomplishments, explaining how they'd learned about my success and current circumstances. The final paragraph begged me to help them, as their daughter, and to remember family comes first. I sat at my desk the next morning and wrote back on company letterhead. I was your daughter when I was 17 years old, unconscious in a hospital bed, while you planned to use my remaining kidney. You chose your son then. Live with that choice now. 3 months later, through the same investigator's final report, I learned the outcome of their situation. The house had been sold at foreclosure, my parents had moved into a small rental apartment, and Nathan had found work in construction in another state. My father's medical bills remained unpaid, and my mother had taken a part-time job for the first time in decades. They had asked the investigator to make one final attempt to reach me, but I instructed him that our business was concluded permanently. But sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing patient advocacy cases or writing policies to protect children from medical abuse, I think about that moment when I was half-conscious, tubes in my arms, listening to my own mother ask a doctor if they could take what was left of my body for my brother's benefit. And I smile because they thought that conversation was the end of my story. They had no idea it was only the beginning. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.